he smelled an incredible aroma as he entered, and when he walked a little further into the room, he saw a gorgeous table. He exclaimed in amazement, "Wow, what is all this in honor of?" Sitting down at the table, Han Yu-jin spoke in amazement as he looked at the dishes. "A real feast! Is today a special day?" Yu Meng-woo replied, "I just prepared more dishes that you might like." Hearing Han Yu-jin's praise, Yu Meng-woo added, "Still, you deserve special treatment." To which he replied in astonishment, "Eh? Well, thank you anyway, hurrah." Deciding to taste the dishes prepared by Yu Meng, Han Yu-jin picked up a spoon, took the first bite, and placed it in his mouth. "This is delicious. Today is not a day of work, but a day of pleasure." As Han Yu-jin was savoring the food that Yu Meng had prepared, he said to him, "By the way, Meng-woo, you don't have many things, do you?" At that, he said in a worried tone, "Yes, why?" Hearing this answer from his friend, Han Yu-jin replied, "Oh, it's nothing special. Just be ready to pack at any time." Hearing this from Han Yu-jin, Yu Meng thought that they were going to kick him out because of his uselessness, and he was frightened. Without even realizing how it sounded to Yu Meng, Han Yu-jin continued, "Sooner or later, a new building will be built nearby, so—" But then he heard Yu Meng screaming and crying. Following the crying and screaming, Yu Meng fell to the floor in disappointment and said, "So, I'm getting kicked out after all. Wah!" Hearing this, Han Yu-jin choked on his food and spat it out, looking at Yu Meng in surprise. Immediately getting up from the table and walking over to Yu Meng, Han Yu-jin said, "What's gotten into you all of a sudden? What do you mean expelled?" To which he replied, "I knew it would come to this." Wiping away his tears, Yu Meng said to Han Yu-jin, Even though you keep me to yourself, I remain a useless F-class." Hearing such sadness in Yu Meng's voice, Han Yu-jin replied, "Hey, come on! I'm also an F-class. Don't cry." Yu Meng said to him, "We are both F-classes, but we are completely different." Thinking back to when they first met, Yu Meng-woo said, "You protected me from high-level hunters without blinking an eye. Even the time they all went to the dungeon for training practice," Yu Meng said in remembrance, "even gave a Yiwu advice to my S-class junior brother. You're really special." After saying all that Han Yu-jin had done for him, and not only for him, but in front of him, Yu Meng said, "And I couldn't even discover a single 10th level skill." After hearing Yu Meng's lament, Han Yu-jin thought, "I'm just a cheater." Then he said to him, "Stop it, Meng-woo." He wiped his tears with his hand and said, "And yet I am nothing." After telling everything that had been weighing heavily on his mind, Yu Meng calmed down and said, "As you said, I think I should move out. Thank you for everything." Hearing this, Yu-jin thought worriedly, "No, really, stop." Seeing that his friend had already taken off his apron to work in the kitchen and was heading for his room, Yu-jin clung to him and said, "Where are you going to go? You have nowhere to go." Hearing Han Yu-jin pleading with him to stay, Yu Meng replied in a sad voice, "Even so, I can't afford to continue to be a waste of your time." Hearing this, Yu-jin exclaimed, "You are not a waste." Looking at the upset Yu Meng, Han Yu-jin thought, "You will obtain an SS grade skill after you sharpen 10,000 blades. You are one of the foundations of my comfortable old age." Watching Yu Meng pack up his things and head for the exit, Han Yu-jin spoke to him. "You have the potential for an SS class skill." To which he replied, "Don't try to console me. Farewell." Realizing that Yu Meng was serious, but he couldn't be let in, Jin thought, "And in any case, I shouldn't mindlessly reveal my skill." Then he said, "Yeah, I don't think I have the right to hold you back by force." After saying this, Yu-jin used some tricks to speak to Yu Meng. "I don't want to make you suffer any more than you already have." Hearing this, Yu Meng said guiltily, "No, Yu-jin." Tilting his head back to appear more convincing, Han Yu-jin manipulated the boy and said, "Just today, I learned some very, very useful information for you." Han Yu-jin immediately turned away from him and said in alarm, No matter how valuable it is, I can't force you to listen if you don't want to." Curious about what Jin had said to him, Yu Meng said, "E? What is it?" To which Jin replied, "I was going to tell you, even though I shouldn't." Yu Meng was ready to do anything to find out, so he said, What is it? Just tell me." Turning his head back to Yu Meng, he stood in a pensive pose, looking at the boy with innocent eyes. Do you want to know before you leave?" After asking this, Yu-jin spoke. "I heard it from Seok Ha-young. There's a training that allows awakened ones like you to discover a special skill. I thought to myself, he'll be more likely to believe it if he mentions an authoritative person." Thinking of the young professor, Han Yu-jin, in order to keep Yu Meng to himself, thought, apologizing to the girl, "I'm going to use your name a little bit, Miss Seok Ha-young. I will definitely repay you later." Meanwhile, Seok Han-kei was sitting in her lab in front of the computer screen, conducting experiments and trying to find out something new for her research. After spending a lot of time in front of the screen, she stretched and groaned. After spending some more time, the girl said thoughtfully, "Now all the preparations are complete. I wonder if it will really help to get an answer. And after these words, she plunged into work again. After taking out all the knives they had in the room, Han Yu-jin gathered them together and placed them in front of Yu Meng, saying, "This training is perfect for you." As Han Yu-jin poured a few more knives out of the bag and onto the table, he said, "But don't tell anyone how you found out about it, not even Seok-ha-young." Looking at all the knives in front of him, Yu Meng said in surprise, "Okay, what am I supposed to do? What are all these kitchen knives for?" Hearing his friend's question, Han Yu-jin spoke to him. "These are all consumables. You have a passive talent that is related to weapons. Try sharpening them." Hearing this instruction from Yu-jin, Yu Meng said, All right." After convincing Yu Meng not to leave, and even making him take the first steps to achieve his unique skill, Han Yu-jin, watching him work, thought, "Good, now if he continues to sharpen knives like this," thinking that this might be the best option for Yu Meng's skill development, Han Yu-jin noticed that he had already sharpened his first knife, and his progress had changed from 0 to 1, and he happily thought, "I thought so. He's enrolled." Seeing the progress, Han Yu-jin spoke to Yu Meng. "I've heard that you can gain the skill of equipping if you sharpen your blades for a long time. Moreover, you will be guaranteed a cool skill that will make you rich." Hearing Han Yu-jin say that, Yu Meng-woo looked at him in surprise. "Really?" he replied. "Seriously, it's a bit difficult because you need to sharpen 10,000. After saying this, Han Yu-jin added, "But if you can manage it in 1 year." Hearing this, Yu Meng exclaimed, "Only 10,000? Really?" After saying this, Yu Meng added, "If I sharpen 100 a day, I can finish it in 100 days. Hearing this, Yu-jin said in surprise, 100? You're going to sharpen them all day long?" Yu Meng replied, "It's okay, I'm pretty good at this kind of thing. I'm good at cyclical work." Taking the next knife in his hands, Yu Meng said happily, "You can count on me, Yu-jin. Before you know it, I'll show you what I can do." Hearing this, and seeing Yu Meng holding a knife, Jin was frightened and exclaimed, "Hey, put the knife down. This sounds strange." Hearing Han Yu-jin say this, and having learned some valuable information, Yu Meng became more cheerful and said, "Ha! I'll work hard, and I'll definitely repay you for your kindness." Hearing that Yu Meng-woo was eager to work, and would achieve good results in a relatively short period of time, Yu-jin rubbed his nose and thought, "Kindness, huh? Your very existence is an investment in my retirement. And now it's time to take care of my investment number 2. When he arrived at Professor Seok-ha-yang's laboratory and spent some time talking with her, she said happily, "Wow, it's so nice to talk to you, Mr. Han Yu-jin. You know so much about dungeons. Are you doing some independent research?" After saying this, the girl was eager to recruit him and said, "Wouldn't you like to go to graduate school? Let's set up a joint laboratory." Hearing this, Han Yu-jin was already thinking of an escape plan. But he thought, "What time is it? Let me go home." The young professor picked up a notebook and drew some animals on one of its pages and said, "Everyone around here says that dungeons are unpredictable." Pointing at Han Yu-jin with her pen, Seok-ha-young said, "Unfortunately, that's why no one even tries to explore them. No one even hopes to find a pattern." Hearing this from the girl, Yu-jin said, "I'm just making assumptions for now. There's not enough information, especially since there aren't many dungeons in our country." Hearing Yu-jin's point of view, the girl replied sharply, "Exactly! Because we are such a tiny country, there are not many dungeons. Oh, I'm sorry, I'll be banned from the world for saying that." Hearing this, Han Yu-jin replied to her, smiling, "Haha, don't worry. I understand what you're getting at. We could collect more statistics if we were able to explore more dungeons." To this, Seok-ha-young replied, "That's exactly what I'm talking about. Why don't most countries allow foreigners to explore dungeons?" To which Yu-jin replied, I have no choice but to join a foreign research team." After saying this, and watching the sad Seok-ha-young, Han Yu-jin added, "And in 3 years, she will discover the principle of dungeon formation with her team." Thinking of what was to come in the future, Han Yu-jin thought, "And the United States will receive a lot of royalties from other countries for its discovery." Recalling that in 3 years' time, Seok-ha-young would discover the principle of dungeons, Han Yu-jin said to himself thoughtfully, if she could discover this principle while staying in Korea. As Han Yu-jin was thinking about how to help the girl, he heard, "That's why I prepared this," Seok-ha-young said as she placed the dish on the table. Looking at what the young professor had brought, Han Yu-jin said, "Buckwheat mug?" She replied, "Buckwheat mug and rice wine on the last night of the lunar month for the Tokabi." Hearing the young professor mention a strange character, Han Yu-jin asked in surprise, "Eh? Tokebi?" She replied, "Yes, the famous teleporting hunter. You've heard of him, right?" After saying this, and realizing that Han Yu-jin had no idea who she was talking about, she said, "Tokebi." Just as the name suggests, an unusual hunter who wears a Tokebi costume. Continuing the story of the strange hunter for whom she had prepared a treat, the girl said, "He never revealed his name, age, or gender, even for the next 5 years." Realizing who she was talking about, and which hunter Sok Ha-young was referring to, Han Yu-jin thought, the only thing everyone knows about him is... He recalls a time when there was a plane crash and there were people on the plane, and only the Takebi was able to save them. Thanks to this, Tokebi can go anywhere, as long as he has the yuag. This legendary hunter, Tokebi, became famous for saving people from dungeons and natural disasters that occurred. Although this skill made him elusive, and at the same time a threat, Takebi was a rather cunning hunter, but at the same time a free man who did not want to obey anyone. One day he showed up at the headquarters of a gang that had just returned from a job and was counting the stolen money, calculating who would get how much upon completion. But as soon as Takebi suddenly appeared in the room, all the gangsters immediately began to show aggression, and without even warning, one of them shot him. But Takebi dodged the bullet. Using his teleportation skill, Takebi was able to easily overcome many of the gang members, and thus dodge the bullets that were fired at him. After defeating one enemy after another, the anonymous hunter, who never took off his mask, set his sights on the gang boss to get some valuable information. Using his skill again, he was able to partially teleport. After sticking his head out of the teleportation circle and grabbing the boss's arm, Takebi looked him in the eye. At that time, the frightened boss, having escaped from the hunter's grasp, took out his weapon and tried to aim at the enemy but could not, because he suddenly disappeared. But then he found himself on top, stepping on the bandit's gun. When he fully exited the teleporter and stopped on the table in front of the group's boss, the unknown hunter spoke to him. "I know that all of you are afraid of my abilities." After he said this, the hunter put his index finger to his lips and said, "Gentlemen with an incredible number of secrets, make it clear to yourselves." Having said this, he disappeared, and never reappeared. At first, Takebi was difficult to catch because of the specifics of his skills. But in the end, there was no group left whose secret he could not find out. In the end, after Takebi learned the secrets of all the gangs, they all became guarantors of his safety. And Takebi himself continued his free and independent journey around the world. And so because of this, Seok Ha-young, scattering fried buckwheat everywhere, said encouragingly, "That's why I thought that Takebi might know all sorts of things about the dungeon." As she said this, the girl scattering the fried buckwheat everywhere said joyfully, she searched for Takebi's summons on the internet. Hearing this nonsense, Han Yu-jin thought, "On the internet?" Scattering buckwheat all over the office. The girl said, "What should I ask you first when we meet?" To which Jin replied, "Wait, but he's not even a real Takebi," Han Yu-jin added, but his sentence was suddenly interrupted by the disappearance of light. "And I think it would be easier for you to ask for help in the abyss than..." When she noticed that the lights in their office had gone out, Seok Ha-young said in alarm, "Hey, the power went out." To which Yu-jin replied, "It looks like the fuses blew." After saying this, Han Yu-jin thought of the best solution and took out his phone and said, "I'll turn on the flashlight on my phone." As soon as he said this, and shone the phone's screen at himself, Seok Ha-young noticed him and immediately froze in place. Seeing this, Jin said, "Miss Seok Ha-young?" Seeing that the young professor looked very frightened, Han Yu-jin spoke to her. "What's wrong with you? Why do you have such an expression on your face?" But she just put her hand over her mouth and said in a frightened voice, Han Yu-jin looked at her and became a little fidgety himself, and holding his phone to light it up, he said to her in surprise, "What's wrong with you?" Seeing that the girl had fallen to the ground and covered her head, Han Yu-jin saw a huge monster behind him, which frightened the girl and frightened him. Noticing that the girl had fainted from fear, Han Yu-jin called out to her, What the hell is going on here? Miss Seok Ha-young." Han Yu-jin ran over to the girl who had fainted and picked her up and exclaimed, "Eek! What is this?" As soon as he said this, his fear immediately disappeared, and a system notification appeared in front of him. Fear resistance activated. Seeing that the fear resistance skill had been activated, Han Yu-jin thought, "That's right, calm down. How would a ghost appear in our world? Although I'm not sure about the monsters. But this is an exaggerated show, a joke aimed at surprising people, and the criminal." After analyzing all the information and figuring out who could have done this, Han Yu-jin immediately shouted at the ghost, "Stop it right now, Tokebi!" Hearing his nickname, the ghost instantly disappeared, and a masked hunter appeared from the teleporter saying, all right, but don't be angry with me." Holding the masked monster in his hands, Takebi said to Han Yu-jin in a happy voice, "I'm here because you wanted to see me." Looking at the girl who fainted from his prank and the boy who was holding her, Takebi said, "Was it too much? I really didn't mean to make her faint. Honestly." After repeating that it was not his intention to scare the girl so badly that she fainted, Takei spoke again to Han Yu-jin. "Come on, don't be angry, Mr. Kim." Han Yu-jin looked at the person in front of him and saw something interesting. The subject is not under the influence of the code word. Seeing this, he thought, it looks like I can raise Tokebi. Looking at him again, and remembering his skills, Han Yujin, holding the girl, thought, an independent hunter. He can move freely wherever he wants. Only when he realized how unique this specimen was, and how he could make it his pet, did Han Yujin say, I want to, I do. Leaning on his arm and holding the girl, Han Yujin began to think of a plan to recruit him and thought, if I can get his support, then Seok-ha-young won't have to go to America. Looking at Takebi with a confident gaze, Han Yujin spoke to him. I'm not afraid of such pranks, so please stop, okay? Hearing this from the boy, Takebi shouted angrily at him. What? You're lying! I could see you shaking with fear! Han Yujin replied, it was just unexpected, that's all. Hearing that he was trying to make excuses, Takebi mocked him and said, That's right! You were scared! You coward, you scaredy cat! To which Han Yujin replied, I told you I wasn't afraid. Do you think I would fall for such a childish prank? Hearing Jin's provocative remark, Takebi said, Childish? That's a classic. Hearing this, Han Yujin thought, Takebi, who loves pranks, a Tokebi who is willing to risk his life to play pranks on others. After assessing his chances of winning, Han Yujin decided to make a deal with the rogue and said, Then how about a wager? Let's see if you can scare me. After these words, Seok-ha-young woke up in the ward on a medical bed. Having recovered from the shock, she was slowly recovering. When she realized what had happened, she immediately got out of bed and exclaimed, where's Tokebi? Did he leave already? After calming down and realizing where she was, she looked around and noticed a guy standing next to her and said, Mr. Han Yujin. Seeing that the girl had regained consciousness, Han Yujin said in disappointment, Boo, Tokebi's sense of style sucks. Blue clothes and a red mask. Is he learning coloring? Han Yujin said this, but saw no reaction, so he said happily, See, it's quiet, so he's definitely gone. Hearing Jin's words, the girl said, God, I'm sorry about that. After apologizing for fainting and having to be dragged to the medical center, she said in disappointment, What a pity. I wanted to ask you so many things. Looking at Han Yujin, she said, Inside this country, I've hit a wall, so I was hoping to break through it somehow, but hearing these words from the disappointed girl in the hospital room, Han Yujin spoke to her. Miss Seok-ha-young, about that. I think I can help you. Hearing Han Yujin say this, the girl called out to him, blossoming with joy. Oh, you're going to graduate school? Hearing this, Han Yujin began to brush it off in alarm, saying, No, I don't mean that. After refusing the offer, the girl immediately became sad again and put her head down, but then she heard, I can be your informant. After saying this, and trying to make amends for refusing the offer, Han Yujin continued, You said that the biggest problem is collecting data, right? After saying this, Han Yujin was asked how he was going to get the information, and he replied, I will have another way to obtain information. No, I have it. Hearing Han Yujin's betting agreement, Tokebi spoke to him in surprise, interested in the proposal. A bet? That sounds good. Shall we bet? Hearing that Takebi was interested in his proposal, Han Yujin announced the rules of the competition, saying, If I'm scared, I'll take you on as a subordinate, but if I'm not, you'll work for me for 3 years. Hearing Han Yujin's strange offer, Takebi started laughing at him, but after catching his breath, he said, Does this miserable F-class want to make me Takebi his subordinate? After saying this, Takebi added, The contract is for 3 years. Even considering that you are the elder brother of the abyssal head, you'll have to work for me for at least 20 years to make it worth it. Hearing that he was aware of him, Han Yujin thought, It seems that he already knows a lot about me. Then he boldly exclaimed, I don't care. Then I'll draw up our contract, right? Looking at Han Yujin, Takebi looked at him in surprise and said, What? This is strange. Suspicious. You're one step away from losing, but you still want to make a deal? Approaching Han Yujin, who was holding the contract paper, Takebi said, What are you hiding? It's unlikely that an F-class has some incredible skill. Are you going to use the item? Standing in front of Takebi, Han Yujin, breaking out in a cold sweat, thought with relief. Phew, still he doesn't know about my skills. Continuing his thoughts, Han Yujin thought, My resistance to fear makes me invulnerable to any oppression and intimidation skills of the legendary class and below. I will win the moment you agree to the bet. After thinking about it, Han Yujin spoke to Takebi. To be honest, I have an ulterior motive. Hearing Han Yujin say this, Takebi asked, Of course, what is it? Immediately embarrassed in order to provoke Takebi into accepting the terms of the contract, Han Yujin looked away and said, Actually, you're just very cool. Thinking back to what Seok-ha-young had told him, Han Yujin began to recount it, saying, You're amazing. You saved people so many times. Thinking back to the time when Takebi burst into a group of bandits and crushed them, Jin said, And that line about the bag of secrets was also very cool. After saying this, Han Yujin continued, looking away and rubbing the back of his head. That's why I don't seem to have anything to lose, right? If I win, it will be a win-win. Seeing that his opponent had fallen for such blatant flattery, Han Yujin continued to praise him. But even if I lose, I will become Tukyebi's own handyman. Succumbing to Han Yujin's flattery, Takabe began to laugh out loud, happy to have met his fan, and then said, "Ha ha 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 ha, that's right. You can't find anyone cooler and more incredible than me." As he continued to laugh, Takabe said to Han Yujin, "You're hilarious. If you were just begging me to take you as my sidekick, it would have been a laugh. But you provoked me with your bet and even signed a contract. I like you." Hearing these words from Takabe, Han Yujin spoke to him. "I'm saying this in advance, but I'm very confident of winning. Is that okay?" He replied, yes, okay. Let's make a bet. I'll make 3 attempts in the next week." Looking at the contract and the terms and conditions, Takabe said to Han Yujin, "If you don't get scared even once, I will become your #1 subordinate." Sitting in the room with Seok Ha-young, Han Yujin spoke to her. I can't tell you about my method of obtaining information, but I will give you plenty of information if you continue your research in Korea. Han Yujin offered a deal to be an informant and provide all the information needed for the research, and said to Seok Ha-young, "Racking my brain is not for me." Seeing me, the girl was surprised, and then thought. Han Yujin added, "That's why if you find the principle of forming dungeons using my information, then you can just share the profits you make from it. How about that?" Hearing the boy's presumptuous words, Seok Ha-young said, "Thank you very much, but there's no guarantee that this research will yield any results." Han Yujin countered, "No one but you can do that, Miss Seok Ha-young." Hearing Han Yujin say this, Seok Ha-young spoke to him, embarrassed. Oh my, you're flattering me." To which Yujin replied, "It's not just flattery. Wait, what is the date today?" Holding up his finger, Han Yujin thought of something interesting to make the girl believe in herself, and to get her to cooperate, and said, "Right, let's do it like this." After saying that, he added, "That new A-class dungeon they found in Ikeon, Gyeonggi-do province. In this dungeon, there will be either a waterfront or slime everywhere." Hearing what Han Yujin had just said, the young professor exclaimed in surprise, How did you know that? How?" Turning away from Seok Ha-young, Han Yujin thought, "Stole information from the future." Getting down from his chair because visiting hours were coming to an end, Han Yujin spoke before leaving the room. "If that is the case, then I will ask you to seriously consider my proposal." After saying this, Han Yujin added with a smile, "I am putting it forward precisely because I have great confidence in it. So you don't have to worry about the results of your research." Having said that, Han Yujin said one last thing before leaving the room, "And please ask your uncle to bid on the auction for the rights to this dungeon." After convincing Seok Ha-young to cooperate with him, and then asking her to ask her uncle to buy the dungeon rights, Han Yujin left the room and breathed a sigh of relief. Pleased that everything was going according to his plan, Han Yujin clenched his fist and said hopefully, "Everything should be fine, right? It won't be a problem if I reveal so much information to her, right?" With that thought in mind, Han Yujin headed home. When he arrived at his room, when it was already night, he said in his head, "I only have to play with Tokebi for 1 week." When Takabe came to Han Yujin in the form of an old witch, he spoke to him as he looked out of the window. "Ha ha ha ha, shall I give you red pants or blue pants?" When the first attempt failed, Han Yujin was playing with his piece and said to him, "Even you won't pay attention to such outdated ghosts, right, Mir?" The next attempt was somewhere in the middle of the week. Han Yujin returned home and exclaimed to his friend, "I'm back. Meng Wu, are you here? I bought some dull knives at the flea market." As soon as he said this, bony hands reached down from below, right behind him, and were about to grab him. This time Tokabe disguised himself as a girl who had lost her legs, and when he came out of the crevice, he grabbed Han Yujin's legs and said to him, "Give me back my legs." Han Yujin fell to the ground, dropping the box of knives. He stood up and shouted angrily at Takabe, "Hey, you promised to scare me, not kill me." Hearing the irritation in Han Yujin's voice, Takabe, feeling guilty, said, "I'm sorry, who knew you would fall so easily?" To which he replied, "Don't underestimate the weakness of F-classes." And one last time, Takabe did his best. When Han Yujin went to the refrigerator in the middle of the night to get something to drink because his throat was dry, Takabe decided to act. As soon as Han Yujin took a glass of water from the refrigerator and turned around, he saw a hay doll that was covered in red paint, as if it were blood. When Han Yujin saw this horrible attempt to scare him for the last time, he said in disappointment, "Oh my. Wow, you really went all out for your last attempt." Turning back to close the refrigerator, Han Yujin said, "But I didn't." No sooner had he said this than he saw a giant, terrifying monster coming at him from above. Seeing this terrifying face in front of him, Han Yujin even stopped in his tracks in surprise and thought, "Uh-oh, a continuous attack?" But unfortunately, the fear neutralization skill kicked in before he could get scared. And so Jin just stayed standing there with the glass in his hand, saying, "It was a little scary. While Han Yujin was talking to Tukaibi, a strange silhouette appeared behind him. As it slowly approached, the floor creaked more and more often. And then, behind Jin, Yuman came out with a knife in his hand. Seeing him, Takebi clutched his heart in fright and exclaimed, "Oh, a ghost!" Han Yujin simply said, "What? It's, oh, Mengwu." He stopped in front of Han Yujin and said, "I couldn't sleep, so I decided to sharpen some more knives." Seeing what happened to his opponent, Han Yujin said, "Hey, Tokebi, if you were scared." Hearing Han Yujin address someone, Yu Mengwu was surprised to hear him say, "Tokebi?" Then, looking to the side, he saw a monster in the corner on the wall and exclaimed in fright, "Gah! A ghost!" After that, Yu Mengwu fainted just like Sokayang. Seeing that his comrade had gone to sleep, Han Yuchin shouted in alarm, "Mengwu!" Looking at what he had done, Tukaibi said in surprise, "Eh? Huh?" Realizing what had just happened, he finally sank to the ground in front of Han Yujin. The next moment, Tokebi burst into tears, realizing that he had lost the bet to an F class and now had to serve for 3 years. And he said, "Wow, I lost." After putting Yumeng to bed, Han Yujin heard Tokebi, who was standing behind him, exclaiming in frustration, "Still, my subject scolded me terribly for signing the contract without permission." Hearing this, Han Yujin asked Tokebi in surprise, "So you have subordinates? Well, you really should have thought about the contract before you signed it." Continuing his hysteria, Tokebi said, "They're going to bury me alive when I get back. I won't be able to go home. I won't go. I will stay here." When Han Yujin heard Tokebi crying, he said to him, "Stop crying. How old are you? You're not a child." He replied, "I am more than 100 years old." Hearing this, Han Yujin replied, "Stop joking." He said, "It is true. I am Tokebi." Jin replied, "That's just an image. How can a Tokebi be real?" Pointing his finger at Jin's displeasure, Tokebi said, "But the dungeon and the awakening are real. Even you have a younger brother who can breathe fire." Hearing this, Han Yujin said, "Well, it's all because of the system." Looking at Tokebi's characteristics with his skill, Han Yujin thought, "Doesn't the existence of Tokebi and ghosts make more sense than the sudden appearance of dungeons and awakened ones?" Looking at his characteristics, Han Yujin saw that his name was Yoon Young and he was in the B class, and then he thought, but isn't Tokebi an awakened one? Although his name is strange for a human. Tokebi, taking off his intimidating mask, was very upset, and at that time Han Yujin spoke to him. Are you really not human?" Hearing this question from his opponent, Tokebi immediately flew up and said, "All right, a wager is a wager. I'll tell you. Chief Kim, I'm over 100 years old in total." As he began his story about who he was and where he came from, Tokebi added to his previous one, "But at the same time, I am only 3 years old." Hearing this, the only thing that stuck in Han Yujin's mind was the fact that Tokebi was really only 3 years old, and it kept repeating over and over again. 3 years old, 3 years old. After telling us that he was only 3 years old, Tokebi continued his story, explaining why. "It has been 3 years since the first appearance of the dungeons and the system." Hearing this explanation, Han Yujin asked in surprise, "So you were born on that day, together with the system?" Tokebi joyfully replied, "Yes, that's right." Hearing that Han Yujin understood where Tokebi came from, he continued, "Originally, Tokebi are creatures that are born from the soul's implantation in an old object." Recalling the first thing he saw when he was born, Tokebi said, "But the power of the dungeon nourished me and awakened me." After saying this, Tokebi said that it was an accident because he was not even supposed to appear. But after the dungeons appeared, one of them awakened him from 100 years of sleep. After hearing everything that Tokebi told him, Han Yujin just stood there, listening in amazement, trying to figure out if it was true, and thought, "This sounds like a lot of nonsense." But after thinking about it for a while, he realized, "But in that case, it explains Tokebi's ability to teleport. If the power of the system in some sense connects different dimensions." Han Yujin looked at the spirit in front of him and thought in confusion, "But how strange it is to realize that I am looking at the real Tokebi." Thinking about the name Tokebi, Han Yujin said, "Yun Yun, right? If one is a surname, then doesn't the first name mean wheel, from the Chinese word for liung? Then your home was originally something like an old watermill, Mr. Yun." Hearing Han Yujin's description, Tokebi said in surprise, "Hey, did you know that? This is unbelievable. The boss is also a Tokebi. Is it like a golden bell for praise?" To which he said in surprise, "Nothing like that." Han Yujin continued on to his room, picked up his tablet, and spoke to his subject. "Well, this is your boss." Taking the tablet in both hands and preparing to give his first order to his new subject, Han Yujin said, "I have a task for you, Subject Tokebi." When Han Yujin said this, he saw that he was very unhappy that Jin had found him a job, and he said to Tokebi, "What is that expression on your face?" Hearing what Yujin said to him, Yoon Young protested and shouted, "What are you trying to make me do? I don't want to do anything sad. To which Yujin said to him, Is this how a subject behaves? After saying this to his subordinate, Han Yujin gave him the details of the task, saying, It is necessary to explore the dungeons of other countries. I have written down everything you need to know. Looking at the disgruntled Takebi, Han Yujin spoke to him. Foreigners are not allowed in the dungeons, but with your skills of stealth and teleportation, it is quite possible, right? Lying on the ground, Takebi asked, Of course it is, but why would you want to do that? Hearing this, Han Yujin spoke again, flatteringly. To make you an even more famous hero, of course. After saying this, Han Yujin continued, If we gather the necessary information, we can uncover the principle of dungeon formation, right? Then the damage caused by the dungeon breakthroughs will be reduced. As he continued to offer the Takebi, Jin added, What does this mean? Research aimed at saving the world. And who will the Takebi who collected the information become? A world hero. While saying this, Han Yujin had already given examples of what the future holds for Takebi, and continued, Wow, it's going to be crazy. There will be merchandise and a biography of the great Takebi. After listening to all the flattery from Han Yujin, Takebi hummed thoughtfully, and then said happily, Well then, I have no other choice. I'll be back soon. Looking at the list of countries he needed to go to, the Takebi said, But do I really have to go to other countries? It's too far away. Hearing this question from the Takebi, Han Yujin asked him in surprise, Can't you just teleport there? To which he replied, Not over such long distances. Remembering his skills, Han Yujin thought, So he can't travel that far yet? By the way, this skill wasn't on the list at all. In that case, recalling that the teleportation skill was not on his characteristics, Han Yujin spoke to him. Listen, Takebi. To which he replied, Yeah? And then Zheng said sharply, I love you. After saying this, Han Yujin allowed one of the possible outcomes to happen, and influenced it to happen faster by thinking, I will raise him until he comes. Hearing Han Yujin say this, Takebi immediately exclaimed, What is this all of a sudden? Jin replied, Don't you know? The original race of Takebi was famous for love. After saying this, Han Yujin added, There are even many anecdotes about being transformed into beautiful girls who wooed men. I thought, I've seen it in an online encyclopedia. As Han Yujin slowly approached Yunyang, he said, For a true taekwondo, love should be a habit. Hearing this, the Takebi said in alarm, Pete, really? Han Yujin added, Yes, this is how we will greet each other from now on. I love you, Yun. Now you try it. Takebi, on the other hand, said hesitantly, Yeah, Liu. Unable to repeat Han Yujin's words, the Takebi ran away from his boss and screamed, I'm coming! Jin said upon seeing this, Damn, that's too bad. Looking out the window, where dawn was already breaking and the sun was slowly coming out of the horizon, Jin said, Well, I am counting on you, my dear subject. The next day, after the Takebi left to gather information, Han Yujin went to the Abyssal Guild to take care of some of his own business. Before he could enjoy the silence, he heard the sound of someone's shoes clacking and loud shouts of, Han Yujin! Mr. Han Yujin! While Han Yujin was in the training room with his student, he heard the door to the room open, and Siok Shmin and Siok Ha-young run in, exclaiming, You were completely right. You were completely right. Running inside the room and picking Han Yujin up from his seat, Siok Shuman began tossing him up, shouting happily, This is truly a slime dungeon. Seeing what was being done to his master, Mir was already preparing to attack, and the visitors were saying, I had some doubts when I placed my bet, but who would have thought that we would hit the jackpot? Seeing his aggressive animal about to pounce on Siok Shuman, Han Yujin exclaimed, Put me on the ground. Peace, calm down. Shimeng then continued, Thanks to you, the Abyss has received a treasure trove, Mr. Yujin. To which he asked, And all this costs money? And Shimeng replied, That's right. These are very expensive raw materials. We won't have to worry about money from now on. Looking at Yujin, Sok Shimeng said, And where did a treasure like you come from? Hearing this, Han Yujin thought anxiously, How burdensome. After saying this, Siok Ha-young said happily, I accept your offer, Mr. Yujin. I will work hard for you. Hearing this, Yujin said in surprise, Oh, really? Thank you. After that, Siok Shuman also spoke up. We're going to put a security beacon on you. Hearing this, Han Yujin cut him off, exclaiming in displeasure, Hey, what the hell? Have you lost your mind? Startled by what he said, Han Yujin picked up Mir and shouted, Stop talking like Yu Hyun. Mir, fast. To which Shumeng replied, But we can't just leave such a valuable talent behind. Hearing this, Yujin said, pointing to Ha-yan, Talent is a tricky thing. I can't make accurate predictions, but Miss Siok Ha-young will do the research for me. Please direct all your support to her. As Han Yujin ran away from Sok Shuman and Sok Ha-yang, he shouted after them, I only know how to train magical beasts. Hearing this, they shouted after him in alarm, "Mr. Yujin!" Running away from Seok Man and Seok Ha-yang, Han Yujin was frightened as he walked. "Do you think I'm going to fall for your flattery? I am going to live a quiet and peaceful life." Looking at Jin with big eyes, Ha-yan said, "Mr. Yujin." He thought, my prediction was right just this once. So many things are going to change from now on. So I'm giving up being an asshole who pretends to know things. On her way back, Seok Han-yak said in a tearful voice, "A true scientist who cares about supporting future researchers rather than his own well-being." And Shimeng added, "You can pretend that you don't, but I know that you care more about the guild than anything else." Upon entering the show, a voice came from the audience. "A challenge! You must find a way out of this animal maze. It has mirrors and toys to distract you." Having said that, the host emphasized, "Even cats and dogs need at least 3 minutes to get out. How much time will it take for a fire-horned animal?" Noticing that he had already completed the quest to find the exit, the host was surprised. "Wow, he left before I finished the introduction." After completing the quest, the pet jumped into Han Yujin's arms, and the host said, "A new record." As expected from a high-level monster, its intelligence is amazing. Catching his pet, Han Yujin spoke to him. "Well done, Mir." Then the host said, "Let's give a big round of applause to Mir and Hunter Han Yujin." As Han Yujin received the applause and praise from all the people for his pet and for himself, he said happily, "Thank you." And he thought, what kind of TV show is this? As he said this, he remembered how Seok Shum-young had spoken to him when he handed him the golden pass card for the show, "These are the hunters of the world." "Why don't you go to the show?" As he handed the card to Han Yujin, he said in confusion, "Why all of a sudden?" Seok Shum-young replied, "We'd better make you famous." Holding his chin and taking a pensive posture, Seok Shum-young said, "No matter how carefully we hide the information about you, it will still be spread all over the world. It's better to just make sure that everyone knows you." After listening to Seok Shum-young's suggestion, Han Yujin agreed to the proposal, but he thought about it. "That's why I agreed, but..." He thought this when he saw Park Aram behind him. As Han Yujin admired his pet, he thought, "I don't like this. I don't have any good memories of appearing on television. I might get a lot of hate on my head again." Looking at Han Yujin's pet, those who saw him said, "Kia-ya-ya, the world is so cute." And then the host added, "I've never seen such an adorable monster before." Holding his pet, and happy to be spoken of in such a way, Han Yujin listened happily. "Seeing this cutie up close is the best part of my career in television." As the show progressed, and Min demonstrated all the skills that he could do, Han Yujin thought happily, changing his mind. TV shows are the best thing in the world. Having done a lot for the show, Han Yujin heard from one of the directors, "Let's take a short break." With that, Han Yujin and Mir headed for a chair to take a break from it all. Resting on the chair, Han Yujin, quite pleased with himself, thought happily as he enjoyed the TV show. "I've shown my baby in its full glory." As he rested, the boy reflected, "Yet, does the world seem cute not only to me? It is a real crime against humanity to hide this cuteness." Approaching Yujin, the two girls said, "The world is so cute. Don't you want to create a page for him on social media? Post his picture." Hearing this, he thought about it. Maybe I should really make an account for him, release merchandise and an album. Envisioning the future when Mir grows up, Han Yujin thought, then he'll be a star by the time he's fully grown, right? Imagining himself wearing a black suit next to his pet, who had a bouquet of flowers around his neck, Yujin thought, and even I will get some glory as a manager and tamer of magical beasts. Lying on the chair, fantasizing about how famous and rich he could become with this TV show, Han Yujin said, well, get in line if you want an autograph." To which he heard a reply, "Already, I'm first in line." As Han Yujin continued to enjoy his imaginary life as a popular TV star, he heard a strange voice say, "Is Mir going to put a footprint as a signature?" Hearing this painfully familiar voice, Han Yujin opened his eyes and saw a familiar girl watching him. As Jin fell from his chair, Moon Hyuna spoke to him. "Hello, brother of the abyssal head." Han Yujin jumped up from his seat at this unexpected encounter and said in surprise, "The head of the destroyers? What are you doing here?" She replied, "Haven't you heard? When filming a monster, there must be at least 3 hunters of Class A or higher present." After saying this, Moon Hyuna added, "That's why I took this opportunity to see you." Hearing this, Han Yujin looked at her with a worried look, but he didn't let her out of his sight for a second. Seeing Moon Hyun-ah standing next to Han Yujin, everyone on the set exclaimed in delight, "Wow, it's Moon Hyun-ah!" And also, "Look, it's the head of the destroyer." While everyone was staring at the leader of one of the strongest guilds, a powerful girl held out her hand to Han Yujin to help him up and said, "Come on, get up!" As Han Yujin stood up on his own without the extra help that was offered, he thought in confusion, "What an aura she has." Looking at Yujin standing up on his own, Moon Hyun said to him in surprise, "E? You don't want to hold hands?" Noticing that Han Yu-jin was unhappy about something, Moon Hyun-ah said in surprise, "Was I supposed to pick you up like a bride?" Hearing this, Han Yu-jin said in alarm, "I don't need anything like that." After saying this, Han Yu-jin added in a sad tone, "Everyone is watching, so let's not misunderstand." Hearing this, the girl said cheerfully to the boy, "Oh, who cares?" After saying this, Moon Hyun-ah added, attracting everyone's attention with her phrase, "You're going to be raising my baby." Hearing such a meaningful phrase, Yu-jin exclaimed in concern, "This is exactly the kind of misunderstanding I'm talking about." Trying to find a way to approach Han Yu-jin, Moon Hyun-ah spoke to him. "Ha ha, I really like you. Do you want to join my guild?" To which Yu-jin replied insultingly, "You have to offer me the best conditions in the world to make such a suggestion." When Moon Hyun-ah heard Yu-jin's response, she said to him, "I like your fearless answers the best." To which Yu-jin replied, "I have nothing to be afraid of. My brother is also an S-class." As he said this, Han Yu-jin also added that he had nothing to fear because not only was his brother quite strong, but he was also, and we're all human. Hearing what Han Yu-jin had just said, Moon Hyun-ah grabbed his shoulder and said, "That sounds great. But there's still something that worries me." No sooner had she said this than Park Aram entered the room carrying drinks and exclaimed, "Uncle, I brought you some drinks." But her sentence was suddenly cut short. No sooner had she entered the room than she saw Han Yu-jin standing in front of her, with Moon Hyun-ah standing next to him, and something began to happen around them. Just as she was about to run to her uncle's aid, the air vortex had already completely blocked their access, making it impossible to break through. Standing behind the air wall, Park Aram shouted out in alarm, "Eh? Uncle?" As soon as she said this, a small gap appeared in the air vortex, revealing only Moon Hyun-ah's face, who put a finger to her lips and said, "I'll borrow him for 5 minutes." Sitting in the center of the scene, Han Yu-jin did not look embarrassed or scared. Rather, his face showed only disappointment. But his pet was on his guard. Noticing that his master was in danger, the Firelion cub took a fighting stance and began to growl at the guild leader. Han Yu-jin was thinking at the time, airflow, a barrier, holding his furious beast in his arms to prevent it from attacking the girl. Han Yu-jin called out to her in frustration, "What is it this time?" To which Moon Hyun-ah replied, "Soundproofing, using a spatial skill." After saying that, Moon Hyun-ah added that there was no need to worry and said, "One of my people will explain everything to Miss Aram, so don't worry." Hearing that, Jin thought in confusion, "Simple, huh?" Hearing the sound of Aram's attempts to break in from outside, Han Yu-jin thought, "It seems that even now her skills are at a serious level. Imim, who is also an S-class, didn't even have time to react. That's unacceptable." After the boy realized the seriousness of the threat, he saw the girl's shadow suddenly hovering over him. Looking up, he heard her speak. "Now we can talk in private." Hearing this, Han Yu-jin asked her anxiously, "Haha, what kind of secret do you want to discuss with me?" The girl replied, "I wouldn't say it's a secret, but it's just that it's not customary to gossip openly." After saying this, she added, "It concerns your brother." Hearing what the leader of the Destroyer Guild had just said, Han Yu-jin immediately changed from being friendly to hostile. After telling him what they were going to talk about, Moon Hyun-ah added, "It seems like you don't know your younger brother very well, and that's what's bothering me right now." Before she could say a few unfriendly words towards the Abyssal Guild head, she immediately said, pointing at Jin, "Just look at him." Seeing Han Yu-jin's angry gaze drilling into her, the head of the Destroyer Guild added, "I haven't even said anything yet, and you're already reacting like this." The fiery horned lion cub broke free from Han Yu-jin's grasp and lunged at the girl, but she said with a happy face, "Hey, calm down. I have good intentions." Stepping closer to Han Yu-jin, step by step, the girl added, "I don't intend to sow family discord between you two." Walking right up to Han Yu-jin, Moon Hyun-ah put her hand on his shoulder and spoke in a serious tone. "But Hyung-nim..." After that, she leaned over to Han Yu-jin and whispered in his ear in a serious tone, "But you really should take a closer look at your little brother." Thinking back to that first meeting that Han Yu-hyun called to introduce her older brother and discuss some of the key points, Moon Hyun-ah said, "I laughed until I fell down during the contract signing because I was so surprised." Recalling the meeting where Han Yu-jin held up his younger brother as a model of the best behavior, Moon Hyun-ah continued sadly, "But if that's the way things are, I can't just ignore it anymore." Recalling what the Abyssal Guild's guild leader was like, Han Yu-hyun, the head of the Destroyer Guild, said, "Do you really trust your brother? Do you really think that the good little brother could lead the guild with his skills alone?" Thinking back to a photo she had seen of Han Yu-jin and Han Yu-hyun together, where the two boys were standing with a bouquet, Moon Hyun-ah added, "An obedient younger brother born in poverty who lost his parents. They don't even write that in children's fairy tales. It's too unrealistic." Hearing the girl's words, Han Yujin immediately rebutted her, exclaiming in an embarrassed voice, "It's just Yu Hyun!" To which she replied, "Oh, of course! He's just like an angel who has fallen from heaven." After saying this, Moon Hyun-ah took a thoughtful pose and held her chin with her hand and said slyly, "That may be true, but you don't seem to know that." Looking at Han Yujin with a penetrating gaze, the girl suddenly spoke a frightening truth, that angels don't go after other people's heads in order to elevate their own guild. After saying this, and recalling what Han Yu-hyun had done to succeed and establish his own guild, Moon Hyun-ah added, "Should I tell you how your brother lived as a hunter?" Moon Hyun-ah then said, "After the worldwide dungeon breakthrough and the appearance of the Awakened Ones, I had to give up my career in sports, and in the end I rose to the rank of guild leader." Having said this while telling her own story, she continued, "But how could I have just started leading the guild if I had only been playing sports all my life? Choi Seok-wan and I joined big companies and played the role of healers." Afterwards, recalling the very evening she first saw the cheeky guy, Moo Hyun-ah said, "Out of the 5 guilds in the country, the only real guild leaders were Song Hyun-jae of Jupiter." Noticing that he had pushed one of the high-ranking managers of one of the big guilds, she thought in surprise. "And Han Yu-heng is from Abyss, a newly established guild." After pushing the manager, who was offering him a kind of favorable deal, Han Yu-hyun just looked down at him and heard him say, "Insolent bastard. You should have been grateful to me for offering you a support offer." But Han Yu-hyun simply ignored the offer and the man's loud shouting and just kept walking. A high school student who ignored the offers of the big shots and decided to start his own guild, recounting the time when Hyun simply walked away from that evening after another confrontation with the man who tried to recruit him, Moon Hyun-ah said, "I thought he was just a kid who didn't know his place, an insolent child who would soon fall down. It's not even surprising that he was restrained by all possible means, and even at one point there were rumors that an assassination attempt was being prepared through poisoning. Funny, but I was still naive at the time, so I rushed to the scene to try to stop it." As she ran into the building where the Abyss Guild leader was about to be killed, Moon Hyun-ah exclaimed in frustration, "Have you completely lost your sense of proportion after the world started going crazy?" She ran into the burning building where the event was about to take place and searched the flames for the bandits. No matter how much you like him and how much he would interfere, he is only a child. After recounting this passage from her memories of the first time she saw Han Yu-hyun's true nature, Moon Hyun-ah added, "I thought it was too cruel to endanger the life of a child, who hadn't even received his personality initiation yet." But what she saw when she entered the room plunged her into chaos and confusion. The entire corridor was covered with mountains of corpses and the flames that engulfed them. Deciding to continue on to find out what exactly had happened here, Moon Hyun-ah said in surprise as she looked around as she walked forward, "What the hell? Is there a monster here?" Suddenly, someone's cry for help came from a room engulfed in flames. Hearing it, the girl immediately rushed to the sound, because it was the only clue among all these mutilated bodies. Arriving at the place where the screams were coming from, she saw 2 silhouettes. One of them was sitting on the ground, leaning against the wall, and the other was leaning on a sword, hovering over him. Noticing this, the girl said in surprise, "Han Yu-hyun?" The man who was sitting down then spoke to his enemy. "Yeah, I will never do that again. I swear, I will never hurt you again." Trying to ask for forgiveness for his actions, the bandit said one last thing before his sentence was cut off. "Only mercy." Seeing this horrific scene, Moon Hyun-ah said to Yujin, "It wasn't an even slaughter." Seeing what had just happened and weighing everything she had seen, she went to Han Yu-hyun and said in a worried voice, "Hey, are you okay?" As soon as she approached the young man who had just killed so many powerful enemies, he immediately attacked the girl who had decided to approach him without even raising an eyebrow. Blocking his attack with her sword, which was covered in blood from the people she had killed, Moon Hyun-ah said with a sinister smile, "Haha, what a fool I am." Looking at Han Yu-hyun, who was covered in the blood of his defeated enemies, looking at her with a murderous gaze, and exuding a sinister aura, Moon Hyun-ah sarcastically said, "I was worried because you were just a child." After saying this, she added menacingly, "Hacha, you are actually the child of a real monster." After that incident, and everything that happened after that, the whole incident was hidden by the gas leak and the explosion that followed, and all the people who were involved in that incident were gradually killed, one by one. After telling Han Yujin about the consequences that followed the incident, she added, "The same forces that had ruled the lower world from the shadows eventually knelt before it and allowed the abyss to swallow them up." Hearing these words from Moon Hyun, "Ah," Han Yujin said in astonishment. "Is this?" She replied, "I know it's hard to believe, but that's how S-classes are." After saying that, the girl stood halfway to Han Yujin, turned her head toward him and said, "I heard that the 2 of you were separated for a long period of time. After saying this, and noticing Han Yu-jin's steady gaze and embarrassed demeanor, she continued, "Don't you think he's not the same person he was before he woke up?" Putting her hand on the boy's shoulder, the head of the Destroyer Guild said one last thing before ending her gossip with him. "Consider everything I have told you very carefully, Henim." Leaning over and whispering in his ear, she added, "At least the man I have seen all this time is not the same as the man you used to know." Remaining in the same position, the head of the Destroyer Guild added, "That son of a bitch is a real monster. Yes, he can pretend to be an innocent little brother." After listening to what the leader of the other guild told him, Han Yu-jin pictured a photo of his brother burning in his mind, as if to symbolize the disappearance of his good brother's image. But who knows when he will show his true face to you? Fumbling in her pockets to get her phone, which suddenly rang, she said in frustration, "It's too dangerous to be around him all the time." Taking the phone out of her pocket, Moon Hyun-ah noticed that she was receiving a call from a contact who was signed as Crazy Bastard. Then she added, "It looks like what happened has already reached the ears of the Abyssal Chairman." Looking at Han Yu-jin, who was hugging his pet with his head bowed, Moon Hyun-ah said to him, "What are you going to do? If you prefer to stay away from him, I am willing to help you with that." After hearing everything that Moon Hyun-ah had told him, and hearing that his younger brother was already on the phone, Han Yu-jin said, "I see." So he also broke down in this chaos. Hearing that her younger brother was calling the girl, Han Yu-jin, noticing the phone in front of him, abruptly snatched it from her hands. The girl, in turn, seeing such abrupt actions, only managed to say in surprise, Holding the phone in his hands, Han Yu-jin answered the call and spoke into the receiver. "Hello?" Hearing the phone picked up, he said, "Moon Hyun, damn you." "Brother." Moon Hyun-ah could only say, "I'm sorry," as she stood behind him. Ho ho. After Han Yu-hyun heard your older brother's voice on the phone, who was being held hostage by that girl, he said in concern, "Are you all right? Did she say anything strange to you?" Hearing his younger brother's worried voice from the phone when he picked it up, Han Yu-jin answered his question. She told me all kinds of nonsense behind your back." Standing behind the guy, the girl sighed in offense and turned away, and Han Yu-jin thought about it. So what? Yes, he did become a little strange. As he continued to reflect on the fact that his brother was really not the same as he used to be, Yu-jin thought, "I wouldn't say that there is not a single drop of blood on my hands. Besides, what older brother would disown his younger brother after experiencing something like this?" After telling his brother that he had indeed heard a lot of new things about him from this girl, Han Yu-jin added, "It seems that I underestimated you." After saying this, Han Yu-jin said with a sly smile on his face, "After all that, why shouldn't I gossip behind her back? Although technically I am standing in front of her last April to be exact." Hearing what Han Yu-jin was saying, Moon Hyun-ah changed from an impregnable lady to a frightened cat, and snatched the phone from Jin's hands as soon as he finished speaking. On April 2nd, at about 5 o'clock in the evening, at the convenience store of SS Icheon, Gyeonggi-do Province, snatching the phone out of Han Yu-jin's hand, a worried voice came from the receiver. "Brother?" She then crushed the phone in her hands and spoke angrily. "How?" Squeezing the phone harder and harder in her hands, Moon Hyun-ah, holding back her shame, turned to Han Yu-jin and said irritably, "Almost no one knows about this, right?" Walking up to Han Yu-jin and grabbing him by the collar, she began to shake him and repeat, "Where did you hear that? Answer me now." Han Yu-jin answered her, "I just overheard it by accident. Is it a secret?" Seeing that his master was in danger again, Mir was seriously angry and was ready to pounce on the girl. And then Moon Hyun-ah said, "Fuck! I can't even kill you to shut you up." Hearing such formidable threats from the head of the Destroyer Guild, Han Yu-jin spoke to her. You don't want riding beasts? Go ahead and try to kill me. You shouldn't gossip about my little brother." After saying this, Han Yu-jin, proposing a provocative deal, said, "Why don't we shut up together now, even though I will be at a much greater loss?" Hearing this, Moon Hyun-ah said in irritation, "Gee, look at him." She stopped her anger and let go of Han Yu-jin, and holding her hand to her head, she said sadly, "Fine, I don't care. I've been fooled by both brothers." Hearing this, Han Yu-jin walked away from the girl and picked up his pet and thought, "Society will find out anyway." Resigned to the fact that she would not be able to carry out her plan, Moon Hyun-ah, preparing to use her skill, said to Han Yu-jin, "I thought you would be innocent, so I tried to push you." After snapping her fingers and dispelling the effect of her skill, Moon Hyun-ah looked at Han Yu-jin and said, "But since you're like this, I guess I don't have to worry about the other guilds intercepting you." Hearing Moon Hyun-ah say this, Han Yu-jin, holding his beast in his arms, who was confused and looking at the girl suspiciously, thought, "Are you saying that everyone is going to pester me like this?" As soon as the curtain of air barrier dissipated, Park Aram could be seen on the other side exclaiming in irritation, Uncle, Sister Hyun, ah. After these loud shouts, an irritated Park Aram ran toward Han Yu-jin, shouting, "You promised not to hurt him!" Hearing this, the boyfriend replied to her worriedly, "I'm fine, Aram." While tapping Han Yu-jin on the back, Moon Hyun-ah spoke happily to Park Aram. "We were just talking about our adult business." Then, leaning over to Jin, she added, "If you ever tell anyone about this, I'll kill you, okay?" Continuing to run at Moon Hyun. Park Aram rammed her head into her body and shouted, "Hey, what are you planning to do to Uncle this time? If you touch him without permission, I'll punish you." To which Hyuna replied irritably, "Oh, you're asking for a fight!" Approaching Han Yu-jin, who was standing nearby with his pet, one of the managers on the set handed him a bottle of water and said, "We'll resume filming in 5 minutes. Here you go." Hearing this, Jin said, "Oh, okay, thank you." As Han Yu-jin opened his water bottle and watched Moon Hyun and Park Aram's behavior, he thought, "By the way, when did they become so close?" Seeing Moon Hyun hugging Aram, the boy continued, "Is it because they're the only S-class women in Korea? Isn't Aram going to join the destroyer after her contract with the Abyss is up?" Thinking about this development, Han Yu-jin remembered something from his future, saying that the Destroyer Guild will soon disintegrate and disappear. Moon Hyun-ah won't last long in a tight cage. The same goes for Choi Seok-wan. In 5 years, both the Destroyer and the ISS will disintegrate. While giving his pet a bottle of water, Han Yu-jin suddenly thought about Moon Hyun-ah's future and suggested the following scenario. Perhaps we should poach Moon Hyun-ah too. Observing her relationship with Park Yoon-rim, Han Yu-jin said to himself, "With her attacking power, she'll be a perfect match for Aram. I don't know what the system is trying to accomplish, but if I need to raise S-classes..." After feeding his pupil, Han Yu-jin stood up, and thinking about how great it would be to recruit Moon Hyun-ah, he thought, "It's better to have a mentor take care of Aram than some muddy guy." Standing behind him, thinking, Han Yu-jin heard Park Aram say, "An uncle won't only raise your baby, he'll raise mine too." Choking on his water after hearing this, Jin coughed and exclaimed, "Aram, get away from Moon Hyun. Immediately, she's a bad influence on you." And after these words, we heard from the audience, "Raising her kids?" Let's continue filming. After the filming started, Han Yu-jin and his pet spent a lot of time posing for the camera and shooting videos. And then he saw a video of himself on TV, where he was holding the animal in his arms and saying, "Peace, listen to your daddy." And at the bottom of the screen it said, "Monster Dad Han Yu-jin, 25 years old."